Hey, it's Aaron, and if you're anything like me, you've probably noticed that over the last couple of years, the world isn't doing so well. An economic recession just looming on the horizon, catastrophic climate change possibly coming through and destroying large swaths of the entire world, and we need someone to blame for all of this. Someone is responsible, some group of people is responsible, and we need to find out who it is. And it just so happens that the media has already determined for us who that group is, or who those groups are. Because we have to be fighting one another, and clearly those groups responsible are the millennials and the boomers. The millennials and the boomers are basically being blamed by each other for every one of the world's ills. And it's no doubt that one of them has to be responsible for everything that's going wrong, and today we're going to find out who it is. And I even wrote up a bit of a list on who exactly is responsible and who we need to blame. So let's start off with the boomers, all right? Now, the boomers have 70% of the world's disposable income. Sorry, of the country's disposable income. And that's a lot of money. So they obviously are doing really well, and they're going to be doing well far, far into the future. Well, unfortunately, it's not exactly the case. Half of all boomers have exactly zero in retirement savings. Something around $20,000 when you add up all of their assets together, which is barely enough to cover 1 year's worth of expenses once they go into retirement. So a lot of them are going to have to rely on Social Security. So clearly, boomers are not the ones that are responsible. It must be the millennials. Well, how are the millennials doing? They must be doing so well. They're the me generation. They need everything given to them. So how are they doing? Well, it turns out that the millennials are unfortunately suffering with crippling student loan debt to the average of $34,500, which is a lot when you consider that the average amount that a person in the United States can afford for an emergency is less than $500. And most people, I think 40% of them in the United States, have less than $400 in the bank account. So having to pay $34,500 in student loan debt is kind of extreme. So clearly, the millennials not doing as well as the boomers. Or are they? Because it turns out that the boomers also have a whole lot of student loan debt. How much exactly? Well, it turns out that they have $34,700 worth of student loan debt. So you think that Generation Z and millennials are suffering with the most student loan debt, but actually it turns out that the boomers are not doing so well either. In fact, they're doing just a little bit worse. Like I said, with the millennials sitting at around $34,500 in student loan debt, and the boomers sitting at $34,700 in student loan debt. So it would seem that the boomers aren't the ones that are responsible, it must be the millennials. So let's move on. Let's focus on something else, because that's not the only kind of debt that everybody has. So let's see about maybe credit card debt with millennials. They are spending crazy amounts of money just buying all of these fancy things like avocado toast and mocha latte coffees and stuff like that. So clearly, the millennials are doing well enough that they don't need to be worrying about their credit card debt. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case, because credit card debt for millennials is sitting right around $5,400 each. That's a lot. But unfortunately, the boomers are doing a little bit worse again. So the boomers are sitting somewhere around $6,826 in credit card debt, whereas the millennials are sitting at $5,453. So the millennials are doing a little bit better. Maybe the boomers should stop spending all their money on avocado toast and mocha lattes. But they're clearly not the ones that are responsible for the recession, because they're still doing worse. So let's see how the millennials are doing as far as job opportunities go. They're spending all of this money on educations. They must be at least getting decent jobs that are paying well and allowing them to succeed. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. More millennials are working entry-level jobs longer, as manufacturing and basically all of the good jobs are moved overseas to other countries. And since the economy and wages have stagnated since the 1970s, millennials are not seeing any sort of growth that they actually had seen during the years that the boomers were gaining the most amount of their wealth. But that doesn't mean that the boomers are doing very well either, because it turns out that because of the fact that the boomers don't have any retirement savings, they are working later in life. And that means that they aren't going to be, and that basically means that they're going to have to stay in jobs longer, which stops millennials from being able to obtain those jobs. So clearly boomers are the ones that are responsible for the recession and all of the world's problems, but unfortunately, a lot of the boomers that do go into retirement are only going to be getting somewhere around $1,400 a month for Social Security. So they're still suffering, and obviously that means that millennials, again, now are responsible for everything. So clearly there's somebody to blame. Clearly we need to point our finger at someone out there. But who? Who could it possibly be? Because as we can see from the numbers, the millennials aren't doing so well, and neither are the boomers. And honestly, neither are the Generation Xers. Basically, nobody in the economic system today is doing well, outside of the elites. Yeah, it turns out that we're blaming each other because we think that one person needs to work harder or one person got everything given to them. But really, we shouldn't be focusing on one another. We should be focusing on the system. It's a very liberal way to be looking at things when we're constantly blaming individuals for the society's problems, when really we should be blaming the systemic problems that created those issues in the first place. It's not the boomers' fault that they were propagandized to their entire lives to believe that the system was perfect and uncorrupted and that capitalism was amazing. They benefited from that system. They got a lot out of it. So they look at us, they look at millennials as being lazy and like we don't try hard because the system couldn't have failed them. It had to have been the millennials themselves. They must not be working hard enough. They must not be trying. And the millennials are looking at the baby boomers and they're disaffected. They realize that this lifestyle that they were basically promised their entire lives will not be fulfilled. They're not going to own houses. They're likely never going to get a job with a pension or any sort of real upward mobility. They're just not going to see it. So they look at the baby boomers and they think, you're the problem. You're the reason why so many jobs have been moved overseas. You're the reason why all of these things are happening. You're staying in your positions longer, so we're not able to get into the job market because those jobs are already filled. And by the time we have the ability to get in there, well, who knows? The world might be completely destroyed because of climate change. We needed to blame somebody. We needed to focus our attention on somebody other than the real problem and scapegoat those individuals instead of them, instead of the system, instead of capitalism, instead of the elites that put us all here. The real problem isn't Grandpa because he did exactly what the system told him to do all of his entire life and spent all of his money. Fuck, Grandpa didn't know shit. He was propagandized too, just like we are today. And we're no better. We're propagandized too every single day when we're reading things on Facebook and scrolling through things online. There's a certain aura that we understand. There's a certain lens that we see everything through, just like everybody else does. Everybody has their own individual lens. But it isn't until we realize that we have to stop blaming everybody else other than the system for the problems that the system has created before we can actually make a fundamental change. At least that's the way I look at it. My name is Aaron. If you do get a chance, please check me out on Patreon. Every dollar does help fund this show. And thanks for watching.